Welcome to the deep dive. Feeling like maybe your study efforts aren't quite paying off.
Yeah, we get it.
You're putting in the hours, but, the information just isn't sticking the way you want it to.
Hmm.
So today, we're cracking the code on effective learning. We've actually dug through a lot of research to bring you science-backed study hacks.
The real deal.
Yeah, the kind that lead to actual memory gains, better focus, and really understanding the material.
Right. Our mission here is basically to arm you with concrete techniques, things you can use right away to study smarter, not just, longer.
Exactly. And prepare for some insights that might honestly make you rethink how you learn.
That's right. Forget that old advice about just logging more hours. It's not always about quantity.
No.
We're diving into how your brain actually absorbs and holds onto information. These are strategies rooted in cognitive science.
Techniques that really tap into your brain's natural ways of learning.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's unpack this. First up, maybe spaced repetition.
Good place to start.
Now, if you've ever felt like you learned something perfectly, only to, forget it a week later,
Hmm.
this is for you. What's the core idea?
Think of it like this. Instead of cramming everything in right before a test, which,
What?
let's be honest, we've all done,
Oh, absolutely. Panic mode.
right? Spaced repetition means you revisit information, but at gradually increasing intervals over time. So maybe you look at it today, then in 2 days, then in 4 days, then a week, and so on.
It's the strategic opposite of that last-minute cram session.
Exactly.
And it plays on something called the spacing effect, right? Our brains seem to remember things better if we see them multiple times with breaks.
Yeah, it's like you give your brain just enough time to almost forget it, and then bam, you remind it.
Okay, why is that jogging the memory part so powerful?
Well, what's fascinating is that active recall. Retrieving that information just as it's starting to fade, it actually strengthens the neural pathways.
Ah.
It makes the memory more durable, easier to access later. It's just a much more efficient way to build long-term memory compared to just staring at it for hours straight.
Right, right. So how can we actually do this? I mean, scheduling these increasing intervals sounds complicated.
It could be, but that's where tech comes in. There are some really clever apps now, like Anki or Quizlet.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
They basically automate it for you. They use algorithms, fancy math, to figure out when you need to see something again.
Based on how well you know it.
Exactly. If you're struggling with a specific fact or concept, it'll show it to you more often. If you nail it consistently, you'll see it less frequently.
That sounds incredibly efficient, like a personalized tutor just for reviewing.
Pretty much.
I remember trying to use Enki for learning biology terms, like mitochondria facts or something.
Oh, yeah. How'd that go?
It felt overwhelming at first, but the app just kept bringing back the ones I kept missing, and eventually, they just stuck. It wasn't about endless drilling. It felt more like the right drilling at the right time.
That's exactly it. It shifts you from passive review, just reading it over, to actively engaging with it over time. Very targeted.
Okay, cool. All right, moving on. Let's talk about structure for study sessions. The Pomodoro technique.
Ah, yes, the tomato timer technique.
Sounds like a pasta sauce, but it's actually a time management tool for focus, right?
Yeah.
What's the recipe?
The basic idea is super simple. You work in focused bursts, usually 25 minutes long.
Okay.
Then you take a short break, just 5 minutes. You do that cycle, maybe 4 times.
4 Pomodoros.
Right. And after those 4, you take a longer break, like 15 or 20 minutes. Then you start again if you need to.
So it's these short sprints of focus, then deliberate pauses. What's the science behind that? Why not just power through for hours?
Well, our brains aren't really wired for hours and hours of deep concentration without a break. Most research suggests focus starts to dip after about, say, 20 to 30 minutes.
Really? That soon?
Yeah, for intense focus. So these short breaks act like little mental resets. They let you step away, refresh, and prevent that burnout feeling.
And the break itself is kind of a reward too, I guess. Helps keep you going.
Definitely.
Oh.
Knowing you have a break coming up can boost motivation to stay focused during the 25 minutes.
I read about someone who, during their 5-minute breaks, they do something totally different, like jumping jacks or push-ups.
Oh, interesting.
Sounds a bit weird, maybe, but they claimed it helped them feel more alert when they sat back down.
Well, that actually makes sense. Even brief physical activity gets blood flowing, including to your brain.
Right.
That can genuinely boost alertness and focus for that next 25-minute block. It's about finding what works for you to quickly reset and re-energize.
Okay, next up. Retrieval practice. This one feels a bit backward at first. It's not just rereading your notes.
Not at all. In fact, rereading is surprisingly ineffective for long-term memory. Retrieval practice is the opposite. It's about actively pulling information out of your memory.
Without looking at the book.
Exactly, without looking.
Yeah.
It's the effort of trying to remember that actually strengthens the memory trace.
Okay, so what does that look like? Give us some examples.
Sure. So maybe at the end of reading a chapter, close the book and just try to summarize the key points out loud. Or write them down from memory.
Okay.
Using flashcards is classic retrieval practice. Try to recall the answer before you flip it.
Right.
Even just making up questions about the material and trying to answer them yourself works. Or trying to teach it to someone else, which we'll get to later.
So it's forcing your brain to work, to search for and retrieve the info instead of just passively seeing it again.
Precisely. And that effort makes a huge difference. There was a really striking study from Purdue University.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they found students who used retrieval practice remembered about 50% more information a week later compared to students who just reviewed the material for the same amount of time.
Wow, 50%. That's massive.
It really is, just from changing how you interact with the material.
So a really simple takeaway for you listening is, after you study something, just close the book, put away the notes, and ask yourself, okay, what did I actually just learn? What were the main ideas?
That simple act can significantly boost how much you remember later on.
Okay, now for something that feels even more counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Interleaving subjects.
Yeah, this one messes with people's heads sometimes.
Instead of that deep dive, like spending a whole afternoon just on history, you actually mix different subjects within one study session. Why? That sounds confusing.
It might feel less smooth in the moment, sure, but by switching between, say, math problems and history concepts or different types of science questions,
Yeah.
you're forcing your brain to work harder. It has to constantly figure out, okay, what kind of problem is this? What knowledge do I need now? It can't just stay in one comfortable groove.
So if I'm studying for, I don't know, a chemistry exam and a French quiz, instead of doing 2 hours of chem, then 2 hours of French.
You might do, say, 45 minutes of chemistry, then 45 minutes of French vocabulary, then maybe back to some different chemistry concepts, then some French grammar. This constant switching actually helps you learn to discriminate between different types of information and strengthens your ability to pull out the right strategy or fact when you need it.
It's like cross-training for your brain.
That's a perfect analogy. Exactly. It builds mental flexibility and perhaps surprisingly leads to better long-term retention and application for both subjects.
Okay, that makes sense when you put it that way. You're not just memorizing in isolation, you're learning to differentiate and apply.
Precisely. Deeper, more adaptable understanding.
All right, now for the visual learners out there, this next one, dual coding, could be a game changer. Linking words and images.
Yes. The core idea is simple. Combine verbal information with visual information as you learn.
How do you do that?
Well, as you're taking notes or learning something new, actively try to create visuals. Draw diagrams, make mind maps connecting ideas, create little charts, even just simple doodles that represent the concepts.
So if I'm learning about the French Revolution, instead of just writing dates and names.
You might draw a simple timeline, or sketch a little cartoon of key events, or create a mind map showing the causes and effects branching out.
Okay. Why does adding pictures help so much?
Because words and images are processed in different parts of your brain. When you use both, you're essentially creating two distinct pathways to that same piece of information.
Like having a backup route.
Kind of, yeah. It makes the memory stronger and gives you more ways to recall it later. More connections mean better retrieval.
It's funny, I remember trying to learn like the parts of a cell in biology. I drew this really goofy cartoon of the mitochondria looking like a powerhouse, with little lightning bolts.
Nice.
It was silly, but honestly, I never forgot what the mitochondria did after that. The image stuck.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Even a slightly humorous or memorable visual creates a really strong anchor for that information. Don't underestimate the power of a good doodle.
Okay, next technique really puts your understanding to the test. Teaching others, also known as the Feynman technique.
Exactly. Named after Richard Feynman, the physicist. He was famous for explaining super complex stuff really simply.
So what's the core idea?
The principle is basically this. If you can't explain a concept simply, like to a child or someone completely unfamiliar with it, you probably don't understand it as deeply as you think you do.
Right. Trying to explain it forces you to identify the gaps in your own knowledge.
Absolutely. When you have to articulate something clearly, break it down, avoid jargon, You quickly find out where you're fuzzy on the
You
details.
can't hide behind complex terms.
No, you have to get to the essence of it.
Hmm.
And that process of simplification, of finding analogies, that's incredibly powerful for consolidating your own learning.
I sometimes try to explain work concepts to my cat.
Uh-huh. Does the cat get it?
Well, he doesn't offer much feedback, no. But if I start stumbling or I can't make it clear, even for a hypothetical, simple explanation, I know I need to go back and review. It clarifies my own thinking, even if the audience is furry.
That's a great, slightly absurd but perfect illustration. The act of trying to convey it forces you to solidify your understanding.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. We need to talk about two things that are just fundamental, but maybe get overlooked in the context of study hacks: sleep and exercise.
Oh, absolutely crucial. These aren't just nice to haves for general health. They directly impact learning and memory.
Let's start with sleep. Why is it so important?
Sleep is when your brain does its consolidation work. While you're sleeping, it processes the information you encountered during the day, strengthens those new memory connections, and integrates them with what you already know.
It's like hitting the save button for your brain.
That's a great way to put it. Without sufficient sleep, a lot of that learning might not get properly stored.
And exercise. We know it's good for the body, but the brain.
Big connection there too. Even short bursts of physical activity, like a brisk walk, increase blood flow to the brain. This boosts alertness, improves focus, and enhances overall cognitive function. Taking a walk before studying can actually make your study session more effective.
So that all-nighter before an exam? Probably a bad idea.
Generally, yes. Very counterproductive. You might feel like you're cramming more in, but your sleep-deprived brain won't be able to recall that information effectively when you actually need it during the test.
Right, it's like trying to save a file on a crashing computer. The effort's there, but the save doesn't complete properly.
Exactly. Sleep is essential for that memory-saving process.
Okay, one last technique. The testing effect. This sounds like just taking tests.
Well, yes, but the key insight is that the act of taking a test is itself a powerful learning tool, not just an assessment tool.
So, taking a practice quiz isn't just about seeing what grade you might get.
No, it's much more than that. The act of trying to recall information for the test retrieval practice, again, actively strengthens your memory of that information.
Ah, it connects back to retrieval practice.
It does. And importantly, it shows you very clearly what you don't know yet. Even getting answers wrong is valuable
How so?
because it flags exactly where you need to focus your future study efforts. It provides targeted feedback. Making a mistake, realizing it, and correcting it is a potent learning experience.
So, using those mock exams, practice quizzes, end of chapter questions, they aren't just prep, they're active learning sessions.
Precisely. It turns assessment into a learning opportunity. Don't shy away from testing yourself.
Wow, okay. So let's quickly recap this amazing toolkit we've just unpacked. We've got spaced repetition,
For making memories stick long-term,
the Pomodoro technique,
for staying focused in short bursts,
retrieval practice,
actively pulling info out of your brain,
interleaving subjects,
like cross-training for mental agility,
dual coding,
combining words and visuals,
the Feynman technique,
understanding by explaining simply,
and the fundamentals, sleep and exercise.
and non-negotiables for brain function and memory saving.
And finally, using the testing effect.
Turning tests into learning tools.
That's quite a list.
It is. And the core message, really, is that effective learning isn't just about brute force, about the sheer number of hours you put in.
Right.
It's about the quality of that time. It's about using strategies that actually work with your brain's natural learning processes.
Studying smarter, not just harder.
Exactly. By shifting your approach, you can unlock so much more potential and, honestly, probably achieve better results with less frustration.
So for you listening right now, maybe take a second to think. Which one of these techniques really jumps out at you? Which one might tackle a specific challenge you face when you study? We really hope you'll experiment. Try one or two out.
Yeah, see what fits. See what makes a difference in your own routine. Think about how they might work together, too.
Yeah.
Or maybe which ones are best for math versus history, for example.
Which brings up a final thought for you to chew on. How will you intentionally weave these science-backed methods into your own learning process, starting maybe today or tomorrow? How can you make your learning journey not just more effective, but maybe even more, dare I say, enjoyable?
That's a great question to ponder. A more effective, more rewarding journey.
Absolutely. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We hope these insights really empower you to learn more effectively and hopefully with a bit more ease.
Until next time, Keep exploring.
And keep learning.